نتر عرب يتردد مسجده عرب ولا شيء
هذا شاي السواح؟
لا على دلة
هذا يصب الساح شاي.
لا هذا لا دليل
معي تمسك معي خطك.
مو الدليل
يا رجل امسك نفسك اني وصيت الزلمه وصل قال والله يا عيني الشيطان دقه ولا دق خليه يطلع بس يلعن ابو
So that was Jordan, the amazing otherworldliness of the Wadi Rum Desert. I have been wanting to check out Wadi Rum ever since I first saw it in a rock climbing documentary in 2018 called Real Rock. And of course, seeing it in The Martian, in Dune, in Star Wars Rogue One, it just seems so otherworldly and beautiful that I knew I had to go backpacking through it at some point in my life. So planning it was kind of tricky because there are no established trails in the entire desert. You have to rely wholly on your land navigation skills and your knowledge of the terrain. So studying up beforehand was a must. I definitely would not recommend this as a beginner level backpacking trip. If you are looking to get started, I recommend checking out some of my other blog posts on mapsnowroads.com or my other videos of trips here in the US to get started. But Wadi Rum is definitely more intermediate to advanced level backpacking, especially when it comes to land navigation and water management. So getting there, I was able to secure a flight from JFK in New York over to Istanbul, and then from Istanbul in Aqaba. I landed in Aqaba about 1 in the morning, and some interesting stuff happened while I was there. I was detained by police in the airport. So the language barrier made it a little nerve-wracking. They were searching through my luggage, and they found a drone, a camera drone, and apparently very much illegal in Jordan. You cannot fly a drone in Jordan without government permission. And it was a little nerve-wracking at first because of the language barrier, but honestly, once I started talking some broken Arabic to them, they got a lot friendlier, and they were actually pretty welcoming. They told me I could pick the drone up on the way out of the country. It seemed very routine for them, so it really wasn't that big of a deal. And they actually helped me find a taxi afterwards. So although it started off pretty scary, it wasn't that big of a deal. Once I got to the hotel in Aqaba, I crashed hard. A few hours later, I was able to check out the city, and like most Middle Eastern cities, it's pretty sleepy during the day, during the heat of the day, but once the sun sets, the city comes alive, and there were tons of restaurants, tons of cafes, tons of history. This area actually played a pivotal role in the Arab Revolt in World War I, depicted famously in the movie Lawrence of Arabia. So the history teacher and nerd side of me was very much excited. I checked out a couple museums, the fort down there, a lot of great restaurants, too many to choose from, so I did my best. After sampling the local food for dinner, I found this very hipstery cafe called Maria's Specialty Coffee Cafe, that if I didn't know any better, I would have thought I was in Brooklyn or something. The next morning, I woke up early to meet my taxi out in front of the hotel for the hour-long drive out to Wadi Rum Protected Area. The first stop right outside the Wadi Rum Protected Area is Rum Village, and that's where I met up with a representative from one of the local Bedouin tribes who brought me out to the camp I was being hosted at, Quiet Village Camp. The Bedouin people, they got a lot of history. So they used to be nomadic around the Hejaz region of the Arabian Peninsula. But in recent years, as Wadi Rum has become more and more famous, they've established some semi-permanent camps around the whole desert area, and now they base their economy on giving tours of local geological and archaeological spots in the desert. I took them up on their offer of one of these tours, and to be fair, I was more looking forward to going out on my own. But I thought it was important that if I was about to go trekking through their ancestral homeland, I might as well help support the local economy while I'm there. And this tour gave me an opportunity to scout out potential campsites along the way. So we saw all the best Wadi Rum had to offer. And then we returned to camp where they shared dinner with me, cooked in the traditional Bedouin way, which is a hole in the ground used as an oven with a layered metal rack with the meat on top and then the rice and vegetables below, so all the flavors intermingle. And yeah, it was amazing. But then I was looking over my maps and I realized one of the spots that we had seen on the tour was less than a mile hike away, and it was this beautiful, beautiful vista. And I decided that the opportunity to wake up to that view was just too good to pass up. So instead of sleeping at the camp that night, I made the short hike out to this little rock outcropping and set up my tent there to sleep under the stars. And it was worth it. Waking up to that view, seeing that valley bathed in that early morning light was just amazing, amazing. So I hiked back to the camp to grab the rest of my stuff, and the camp manager, Salim, sat down with me to give me advice for the upcoming journey, and he fed me breakfast and sent me on my way. The first spot I checked out was Kazali Canyon, right around the corner from Quiet Village Camp, and it was amazing. This behemoth rock formation with just this crack down the middle. This canyon acts as a funnel for rainwater, which made it an extremely important place for travelers passing by over thousands of years, as you can see from the multiple petroglyphs from different eras of time in the canyon. Of course, as important as it was for them back then, it'd be just as important for me to properly manage my water on this trip. So I normally hike with about 2 liters of water. I tripled that with 6 liters, and I knew that management was going to be tricky. I had purposely planned my route to pass by other Bedouin camps along the way so that I may humbly request to purchase water from them had I needed to refill. And it was needed. It was needed. For sun protection, I was wearing my long sleeve hiking shirt, my Columbia Silver Ridge, and something new, hiking gloves, so that I didn't have to keep on applying sunscreen to my hands, and the Bedouin headscarf I was wearing called a shmag. Now, I have hiked with a wide-brimmed hat before in hot environments, and I've used this shmag before in Iraq. And I gotta say, I'm surprised at how well this thing kept me cool. You wouldn't expect a scarf to keep you cool, but it kind of acts as if, you know when you get your jeans wet and they stay wet and they're cold? It's kind of like that. 1, it keeps the sun off you, and 2, your own sweat is keeping it wet and keeping it cool. Despite all that, however, it does get brutally hot towards the middle part of the day, and I found it best to start early and then towards midday find a shady spot and just kind of wait out the hottest parts of the day. The first day of hiking, the options were pretty slim for shaded spots, except I saw this one spot off in the distance, so I made it out that way. And when I got there, I realized apparently I was not the first one to have that idea, because to my amazement, no signage, no anything, there were petroglyphs on the rock right in this shaded spot. I have no idea how old they were, but they look pretty similar to the ones that I saw in Kazali Canyon. So that was pretty awesome. It was like I was chilling with the ghosts of other voyagers that have come through for thousands and thousands of years. I kept going and I made it to my first camp spot, the Great Red Dune of Jebel Karg. So hiking in the sand is as difficult as you think it would be. For every step, you're taking about a half step backwards. You know, for anyone that's ever tried to walk on the beach, you know what I'm talking about. So that by itself was pretty exhausting. Getting to the sand dune was even more so. The sand dune's about 1,000 feet tall and with a 45-degree incline. So that was pretty exhausting. I took frequent breaks to catch my breath. But I was awarded to some of the most amazing views both to the north and the south. And when I got to the top, it was the perfect spot to set up camp. It was amazing. It was beautiful. And it was a great way to end the day. The next morning, as soon as the sun peeked over that horizon, it felt like someone turned on a heat lamp. So to take advantage of the coolest part of the day, I decided to skip breakfast and just get going. It was truly eerie how quiet the desert was. You know, there's no trees for the wind to play with, no frogs or insects chirping or croaking, and it was just amazing to stand there in the wide open silence of it all. After continuing on for a few hours, I realized I was going through water a little bit quicker than I had anticipated, so I decided to reroute to a path that was going to bring me a little bit closer to some other Bedouin camps. This new path also brought me closer to the Lawrence House, which is reportedly where T.E. Lawrence spent some time sheltering during the Arab Revolt of 1917. Lawrence has an interesting story, despite the fact that he's a little bit controversial because the 1962 film really smacks of that whole white savior trope that you see in Hollywood back then. The true story is actually more akin to something like Avatar, Fern Gully, Dances with Wolves. So Lawrence was a British archaeologist who was recruited by the British military to act as liaison to the different Arab tribes seeking to unite against the Turkish rule. He fully immersed himself in the Bedouin culture and became a true believer in the Arab Revolt's cause for Arab independence. He continued to advocate for them even after his own government betrayed them with the Sykes-Picot Agreement by splitting up the Middle East into different sectors controlled by the British and French empires, creating many of the problems we're still experiencing today. You know, as a history teacher who teaches modern history, I often wonder how drastically different our modern geopolitical world would be if Sykes-Picot never existed. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent. Usually this is when I have one of my students tell me to stay focused. If you do want to learn more about this topic, may I recommend the great book, Lawrence in Arabia, War, Deceit, Imperial Folly, and the Making of the Modern Middle East by Scott Anderson. Moving past the Lawrence house, I could see off in the distance this Bedouin camp up ahead, and the plan was to humbly ask to purchase water from them as I got there. But before I could do any of that, I see this guy with his hand up yelling at me, asking if I needed water. Before I even made it into camp, there he stood with bottles of water, gesturing for me to come sit in the shade and cool off. This guy's name was Habib, and he was extremely friendly and welcoming. He seemed shocked, impressed, and confused that I was out there backpacking alone. But we shared conversations and stories in broken Arabic and broken English, and he absolutely refused to take any money for the water. And before sending me on my way, he made sure I had everything I needed and said if I needed anything else, come back to this camp. He said, we are brothers. So he'd be there for me. It was really, really a cool experience. I kind of wish I got a photo with him. Instead, I just got a photo of the camp. This is the camp where the goat's head skull was hanging. I then crossed the wide expanse across the center of Wadi Rum, and I realized I was getting pretty weak compared to the day earlier. I realized I'd skipped breakfast, so I down a few Cliff Bars. But with as difficult as hiking through the sand with a full pack on was, and the rate at which I was going to the water, I knew I had to adjust my plans for the third day. I had originally planned to camp out by Bedouin Rock Bridge, but that would have brought my third day through an area that was devoid of other camps and devoid of spots of interest for passing jeep tours. So instead, I decided to set up camp at a spot that I had scouted out on the tour a few days earlier. This beautiful spot called Abu Kahasha Canyon. It's a tiny little canyon that is only a few feet wide at its narrowest point, and had these two fig trees that are just growing out of the sand in the center, and I thought it'd be a great spot to set up camp. So that was the way I was heading. It was a pretty popular spot. Like I said, my tour is the one that brought me over there a few days earlier, and on the way to this canyon, I did pass a few other jeep tours, but by the time I got there, it was clearing out, and once it cleared out fully, that's when I set up my tent under the fig trees and just relaxed and practiced some astrophotography. So anyway, the next morning, I come out of the canyon, I reorientate myself with the compass and map to figure out where I'm going. And instead of heading deeper south and cutting across north, I decided to cut across the Center Valley heading northwest. You know, it was very surreal in this part of the desert where it's just completely wide open. I'm used to normally hiking on mountain trails that twist and turn, and there are trees all around you, canopy. You can't really see too far ahead of you. Here, in this wide open desert, I could see all around me for miles and miles and miles. And the only way to navigate, really, was to pick a spot that was far off, keep my eye on it, set course, and just walk that way for a while. Eventually, I did start to see other people again, and I flagged down one of the 4x4s and just asked them if they were heading into Rum Village, and as luck would have it, they were, so I hitched a ride, headed into Rum Village, found a cafe to sip on some Turkish coffee before securing a taxi and heading back to Aqaba. So that was it. That was the Grand Wadi Rum adventure. Definitely one for the books and a once-in-a-lifetime experience. If you want even more detail about this trip, check out the blog post at mapswithnoroads.com, linked below. And if you want to see more videos like this, make sure you're doing that whole like and subscribe thing. And that's all I got for you. See you on the next one.